Hello everybody, my name is Dwayne Massey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In my YouTube video entitled How We Learn Part 2. Lecture material that go along with this video can be found on my website www.masseyinstitute.com. If you want to stop this video at this point and download these materials, please do so. Go to the website, select the lecture material tab, select the title of this video, and print out the associated material. You can then follow along on it as the video progresses. You may restart the video when you are ready to do so. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to focus on principles related to operant conditioning. We are all familiar with the principles of operant conditioning and use these techniques in our daily lives to some extent all the time. The principles of operant conditioning were set forth by B.F. Skinner, who I affectionately like to call Uncle B.F. My mother's maiden name was Skinner. He's not really my uncle, I just like to call him that. It is Uncle B.F. and his rat. Skinner actually utilized various animals in his experiments to demonstrate that they could learn various behaviors through the use of operant techniques. Operant conditioning can be defined as conditioning that takes place in response to the application or withdrawal of rewards and punishments. The basic principles of operant conditioning include positive reinforcement, which involves a stimulus that increases the probability that a desired behavior will occur. Examples include praise, recognition, grades, and money. Negative reinforcement, which is the removal of an adverse or unpleasant stimulus. An example would be performing at a certain level to avoid harsh comments from the coach. Positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement are principles that have a tendency to increase behavior. So if you want to increase a certain behavior or make it more likely to occur, use this technique. Punishment involves the delivery of an adverse stimulus to decrease a behavior. Punishment is something you do or apply to someone else. Corporal punishment is probably the practice that first comes to mind in this regard. Getting a whipping or a spanking at home, or getting licks with a paddle at school for those of us old enough to remember that practice. Having athletes run for punishment, both of which are frowned upon in certain quarters of our society today. Omission training, which involves the loss of a reward or a pleasant stimulus in response to an undesired behavior. Being sent to bed without supper. The first decade or so I taught this class, I rarely had students reveal they had experienced this alternative. As the years went on, I had more of my students share that they had been subject to this behavioral technique. Seems a little draconian when you think about it. Being denied a water break. It used to be a common belief among coaches that denying athletes water made them mentally tougher. We now know that even small amounts of body weight loss due to dehydration can negatively impact athletic performance from a physiological standpoint. Just a 1% body weight loss due to dehydration can negatively impact performance. A 3% loss of body weight due to dehydration can significantly impair performance. And 7% loss of body mass due to fluid loss can cause collapse and death. I once lost 18 pounds in the practice, which corresponded to 7% of my total body weight at that time. If this occurs, the rule is that the athlete does not return to practice until they have regained all the weight they have lost from the previous training session. The sad thing about my experience is that I went back to practice the next day, even though I had regained only 10 pounds from the previous day and was still 8 pounds under my normal weight from the day before. Looking back on it, doing that could have had catastrophic health consequences for me. It is always contraindicated to deny athletes water during practices and training sessions, and doing so can have severe and fatal consequences for the athletes involved. Punishment and omission training are principles that have a tendency to decrease behavior. If you want To make a behavior less likely to occur, apply these techniques. The most popular and often used operant techniques are positive reinforcement and punishment. This is because they are easy. It is easy to give positive reinforcement. It's easy to give praise. It's easy to recognize someone for doing something positive. It is easy in some cases just to give people money. The same thing is true about punishment. It is easy to apply punishment without much thought or giving much consideration to the consequences. Operant techniques in sports include use of public recordings. The theory being, if you see yourself ranked against others, it will motivate you to do better in the future. The technique can be used to post test scores. Used to be a professor would post the name and the test score of the student on their office door. This is no longer considered legal or ethical. Now, because of confidentiality reasons, the professor may ask the student for a code, something only the professor and the student would know. And the professor would post the test scores using this code to preserve anonymity. In sports, this technique has been used to post times for distance runners or swimmers. Use of some type of token system. Having the opportunity to earn tokens to gain a privilege or some type of reward. This was the system used at the juvenile detention facility I worked at for students to earn the right to be paroled home. Opportunity to engage in a preferred activity. If you do what you're supposed to do all week, we will do something special on Friday. Let's focus specifically on punishment for a minute. Lewins and Nation have a great vignette about punishment in their book entitled Sports Psychology. And here is a copy of that book. Although I believe it is no longer in print, it is a very good book on sports psychology. It is a resource I encourage you to check out if you can find it. It may very well still be available on Amazon or other online resource. The bottom line of the vignette is there are few exceptions where it is better to punish a sin than it is to reward a virtue. Let me share with you an aspect of punishment from my life that mirrors the vignette. My junior year in college, we went to Oxford, Mississippi to play Ole Miss in football. I had an absolutely horrid game. I jumped off sides. I had a holding penalty. The temperature on the field during the game was 110 degrees. At the end of the game, I became so fatigued I could not make a play that would have extended the drive. When we went back to practice the next week, in the meeting, all my mistakes were read out loud for the whole team to hear. After practice, the coach ran me until I collapsed, and a couple of my teammates had to help me inside and deposit me in my locker. The bottom line to this story is that being punished and humiliated did not make me feel any worse than I already did about the way I played. It did nothing to make me avoid having a bad game in the future. Nobody wanted to play better than I did, and nobody wanted to avoid having a repeat performance of that game than me. Don't get me wrong, I believe punishment has its place and is appropriate in certain circumstances. Slapping a child's hand to keep them from opening a car door when it is in motion is completely appropriate. But as an adult, you have to know why you are using punishment. What is your objective? You need to make sure you are not punishing in anger, and that you are not just punishing someone to make yourself feel better. The principles of operant conditioning, when properly applied, can be very effective in teaching, modifying, and changing behavior. And as we stated earlier, we all have a tendency to use these techniques in our daily lives. This wraps up our discussion today on how we learn, part 2. In our next video, we will conclude our discussions on how we learn by focusing on techniques involving cognitive learning. In conclusion, as always, I hope something we said today was useful and had some relevance to you. Be on the lookout for my next video, which I hope to post in the relatively near future. Again, be sure to check out my webpage, www.masseyinstitute.com. Additional information about sports psychology and the topics discussed can be found there. Also, if you like what you see today, be sure to subscribe to this channel. And be sure to leave comments, as I'm interested in what you think of these efforts. Thank you so much for watching today.